Why is there so much hatred toward a people who make up less than 0.2% of the world's population? How is it possible that, across different eras, places, and cultures, the Jewish people have been targeted with persecution, massacres, accusations, and conspiracy theories, even when they held no real power? This question is uncomfortable, provocative, and above all, it takes courage to ask it honestly. After all, we're not just talking about ancient history. We're talking about a pattern that repeats for millennia. Exclusion, distrust, envy, fear. Jews have been enslaved, expelled, demonized, exterminated, and still they persist. Why? What is it about them that sparks such consistent rejection? Is it cultural and religious differences, a tribal mindset of us versus them, or the discomfort caused by a group that, even when marginalized, rose to prominence in key areas of society? In this content, you're going to dive deep, but clearly, into the core factors that feed anti-Semitism. From ancient Egypt to Nazi death camps, from Hollywood to the Israel controversies, and into dangerous myths like dual loyalty or the rich and controlling Jew, nothing here will be shallow. You'll understand how fear, ignorance, and prejudice organize themselves, and most importantly, you'll walk away with more clarity, more empathy, and less room for blindly echoing what common sense whispers without question. Chapter 1. Why have Jews faced so much hatred throughout history? Since the earliest historical records, the Jewish people have been targets of a level of persecution few groups have experienced so frequently or intensely. It's no coincidence, nor the result of isolated incidents. For some deeper reason, this group has been repeatedly scapegoated during social crises across eras and civilizations. This ongoing prejudice isn't something that can be explained in a single sentence. It's as if, in every time of crisis, the blame always lands in the same place. Some scholars suggest this persistent hatred is fueled by much more than mere religious disagreement or cultural difference. The truth is, in uncertain times, humans tend to look for someone who represents the other, the outsider. And Jews, by upholding strong traditions, a firm identity, and some resistance to assimilation, often stood out, making them natural targets of suspicion. Think about it. When everything around you is falling apart, difference can quickly turn into perceived danger. Now imagine this repeating over centuries. Imagine the effect of repeated narratives in books, sermons, laws, painting Jews as strange, separate, sometimes even dangerous. Over time, those ideas take root, and even as reality changes, the stigma lingers like historical ghosts. So the question deepens, is this rejection simply about being different, or about what that difference represents to a society in distress? Chapter 2. The us versus them instinct and tribal survival. Since ancient times, humans have carried a deep instinct to belong to a group. In tribal communities, survival depended on loyalty to one's clan and distrust toward outsiders. It was simple. Anyone unfamiliar might be an enemy, or bring diseases that could wipe out entire families. That primal trait hasn't disappeared. It's just become more sophisticated. Today it shows up as extreme nationalism, political tribalism, or religious intolerance. This us versus them mentality creates invisible barriers that divide people by appearance, culture, or belief. And when society is in crisis, be it economic or political, people tend to look for culprits. Minority groups often get labeled as the cause of society's problems, and throughout history, Jews were frequently cast in that role, not because they were guilty, but because they were different enough to trigger discomfort. Even today, despite all our progress, we still see traces of this tribal logic in hate speech, social segregation, and ideological echo chambers. The challenge is to recognize when this ancient instinct is manipulating us. Overcoming it takes awareness. It means realizing not every other is a threat, and that diversity, when embraced, is not weakness, it's cultural strength. Chapter 3. Religious and cultural distinction among Jews. From the earliest times, Jewish culture has centered around preserving a unique identity. Dietary laws, distinctive clothing, unique holidays, and a near-sacred dedication to education built a strong and enduring sense of belonging. This wasn't just tradition. It was spiritual survival in empires that demanded cultural conformity. In that context, being different was an act of resistance. But what protects can also isolate. By maintaining practices that set them apart from dominant cultures, Jews were often seen as those who don't mix. And in societies that value sameness, difference can seem like a challenge or a threat. Eating differently, dressing differently, speaking a distinct language, all of it makes people uneasy. And as we've seen, unease often leads to prejudice. Even today, many Jews follow traditions that distinguish them from other communities. That's not separatism. It's historical continuity. Cultures don't survive thousands of years by accident. The strength of a preserved identity also triggers admiration, and unfortunately envy or fear. It's as if the world says, if you want to be accepted, be like us. And Jews often answer, we'd rather be who we've always been. Chapter 4. Christianity's Role and the Construction of Collective Guilt. The relationship between Christianity and Judaism is complex, almost like siblings who had a bitter falling out. After all, Jesus was Jewish and so were his earliest followers. But the Gospels, written decades after the crucifixion, shaped a narrative where Jewish leaders were portrayed as traitors. This version, adopted by the Church, planted a seed of collective guilt that lasted centuries. Guilt that belonged to a few was unfairly placed on an entire people. The idea that Jews killed Jesus, despite being a historical distortion, became doctrine during the Middle Ages. The result was brutal: persecutions, expulsions, and massacres justified as divine justice. Imagine growing up in a world where your people are automatically blamed for killing God. That weight isn't just unfair, it's unbearable. But for centuries, it fueled violence and exclusion. Over time, some branches of Christianity softened this narrative, especially after the Holocaust. Still, its legacy lingers in modern sermons, jokes, and even theology. It's the kind of story that embeds itself into culture and resists logic. And when it mixes with politics and economics, it becomes a volatile cocktail. Because when faith and hate walk hand in hand, history tends to repeat its darkest chapters. Chapter 5. Social exclusion and the forced success in specific fields. Throughout history, Jews were banned from many professions, barred from owning land or integrating into society, not due to lack of talent, but because of religious laws and systemic discrimination that pushed them to the fringes. Many turned to commerce, moneylending, or trade, areas that were open but marginalized. These weren't chosen freely. They were survival paths. Over time, those paths led to expertise, and then to resentment. That resentment only grew when Jews began to succeed in those areas. What started as necessity became excellence. Banking, finance, trade. Many Jews thrived in places others wouldn't even enter. But instead of admiration, they received suspicion. Their success was seen not as effort but manipulation. And prejudice found new fuel. The stereotype of the greedy, controlling Jew. Even today, when people say things like they control the banks or run the media, it's important to remember, these accusations echo centuries of forced exclusion turned into skill. Look closely before repeating tired narratives. After all, no one resents the success of those who had all the doors open. But when someone wins despite all the doors being closed, that's when the conspiracies begin. And that takes us directly into how fear and politics twist these stories even further. Chapter 6. Nazi radicalization and anti-Semitism taken to the extreme. When Germany plunged into economic chaos after World War I, public resentment needed a target, and the Nazis, with their sharp propaganda machine, pointed the finger with surgical precision. The Jews. They revived old narratives, modernized the discourse, and created an internal enemy to justify their ideology. The people, broken and desperate, accepted the lie, because it gave them emotional relief amid the misery. Anti-Semitism grew stronger, put on a uniform, and picked up a weapon. The stereotype of the greedy Jew became institutionalized. Posters, newspapers, and radio broadcasts repeated the same accusations, that Jews controlled the banks, sabotaged the economy, and betrayed the nation. This social construction turned neighbors into imaginary traitors, and when that is combined with absolute political power, the result is devastating. The Holocaust wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was the climax of centuries of organized dehumanization. It's important to remember that this kind of hatred doesn't begin with concentration camps. It begins with jokes, with suspicion, with whispered generalizations. Then it becomes law, then it becomes violence. History is screaming a warning. Radical discourse always starts with a reasonable excuse. The problem is, once accepted, it doesn't stop. And those who think it's all in the past should pay closer attention to the rhetoric making its way back into today's conversations. Chapter 7. Jewish Success and Modern Distortion, Hollywood, Finance, and Influence. In the last 100 years, Jews have stood out in fields like cinema, education, medicine, technology, and finance. This didn't happen by magic or conspiracy. The Jewish culture has always valued reading, formal education, and analytical thinking. In a world that rewards knowledge, it's only natural this translated into influence. But for outsiders, someone else's success often looks like privilege. Take Hollywood, for example. It was largely built by Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, fleeing poverty and persecution. Shut out of traditional industries, they found a foothold in entertainment. They built studios, created stories, and changed the world. But with fame came the label, "They own everything." Admiration turned to envy, and envy to accusation. The same pattern appeared on Wall Street, in law firms, and in academia. Where there was dedication, there was achievement. And where there was achievement, suspicion followed. The line between legitimate influence and imagined control is thin when someone already leans toward distrust. That's the danger in distortion. All it takes is a crisis, and what was once a success story becomes a reason for hate. History shows us success never fully protects anyone from persecution. Chapter 8. The idea of dual loyalty and the connection to Israel. One of the most recurring accusations against Jews is the claim of dual loyalty, the idea that they're more loyal to Israel than to the countries they live in. This perception, though shallow, echoes ancient fears. For centuries, Jews were considered foreigners everywhere, even when they were born there. Without full citizenship, they were seen as loyal to no land, and now, with Israel as a state, that connection becomes a new point of suspicion. It's true that many Jews around the world feel a deep connection to Israel, whether through cultural identity or religious heritage. But that doesn't cancel out their patriotism to the nations they live in. A person can love their family and still be a good citizen. The analogy may sound simple, but it's a useful way to dismantle the idea that multiple loyalties equal betrayal. The real world isn't as black and white as extremist rhetoric suggests. The problem is that during Middle East tensions, this accusation resurfaces with force. The perverse logic goes, if you're Jewish, you automatically support everything Israel does, which completely ignores the diversity of opinions within Jewish communities. These generalizations don't build bridges, they build walls. And historically, those walls turn into trenches very quickly. Chapter 9. The difficulty of distinguishing legitimate criticism from prejudice. Debating what happens between Israel and Palestine is a minefield. On one hand, there are valid criticisms of political and military actions. On the other, there's hatred dressed up as opinion. The problem is that many people confuse the two, sometimes out of bad faith, sometimes out of ignorance. And when that line is crossed, the discourse stops being political and becomes dangerous, because someone who starts by attacking a country may end up attacking an entire people. Phrases like "Jews control politics" or "they always defend each other" may seem harmless to some, but they echo centuries of persecution. Criticism of Israel should exist in a democracy, but when it becomes an excuse to harass Jews who have nothing to do with government decisions, something's gone very wrong. This confusion is increasingly common in debates, especially online. Freedom of speech is a core value, but it comes with responsibility, knowing where argument ends and offense begins. When someone is harassed just for speaking Hebrew or wearing a religious symbol, that's no longer politics, that's raw prejudice. And at that point, the debate stops being constructive and becomes fuel for hate. Understanding that difference is essential if we don't want to repeat mistakes we already know too well. Chapter 10. The Israel-Palestine conflict and the resurgence of antisemitism. Few conflicts in the world stir as much emotion as the one between Israel and Palestine. And unfortunately, alongside political debates comes a surge in hate speech. When tensions rise, it's not just armies that go to war. Ideas, prejudice, and stereotypes catch fire too. Many people use the moment to unleash feelings they've long held, now under the excuse of protest. Violence from one side doesn't justify violence from the other. But what's disturbing is seeing that when Israel reacts, ordinary people, Jews with no ties to the conflict, become targets. Stores are vandalized, synagogues are threatened, religious symbols are defaced. This isn't about military decisions, it's about being Jewish. And that reveals a deeper issue than just geopolitics. This conflict gives cover for old hatred to reappear in new packaging. Anti-Israel becomes, in some contexts, code for anti-Jew, said with a modern gloss. That's dangerous because it masks prejudice under the illusion of legitimacy. The world must learn to separate politics from identity, because if it doesn't, the next wave of hatred will just be a replay of history, and we already know how that ends. Now that you've walked through this historical journey and seen why hatred toward Jews has persisted for centuries, it's time to pause and reflect. What are you doing with the knowledge you gain? Do you repeat phrases without knowing where they come from? Or are you ready to challenge narratives and break cycles of ignorance? In today's world of polarized opinions and instant judgments, seeking depth has become an act of bravery. And if you've made it this far, you're already among the few who choose to think beyond the surface. But this only matters if you carry this understanding into your actions, in how you speak, how you teach, how you move through the world. This isn't just about history, it's about humanity. So, what now? Share this knowledge. Reflect on your own biases. We all have some. And if this content helped you see things differently, don't keep that to yourself. Let's spread more empathy, more awareness, and less rushed judgment. And if you're eager to keep learning, digging deeper, and uncovering the stories behind the headlines, stay close. There's a lot more where this came from,